Hello there, I'm Father Ed Nadolny from the Father Nadolny Good News Fund. And during the past weeks, you'll probably see the little commercials that we've had on promoting this show, but also to getting people to pray all during the day if they bump into one of my commercials. So the purpose of the program is to make you my special guest. So if you have any questions, any comments, all you have to do is call me at 860-321-7405. That's 860-321-7405. And in the introduction of this show, I usually don't show any movies, but this time I'm going to give you an opportunity because of my own experience. I've been a priest for 60 years, and I'm closer to the tomb than I am to the womb. And many of the people that come to me are people who've had abortions or were considering to have an abortion. Now, I don't know how you feel, if you're pro-abortion or you're pro-life, but all I'd like you to do is kind of sit down when we show this segment of abortion procedures, where we go from the first trimester to the second trimester and the third, and just show you in a way that's very, very touching and very delicate, and it's animated, so it is acceptable. So I'd like to have you call me after the presentation and ask me how you feel about it. Remember, write down 860-321-7405. Okay, now I would like to show you a segment of abortion procedures and then get your comment after it, okay? Well, sit back now, and if you are with anybody in the family, sit down and watch it, and let me know how you feel about these three different samples of abortion.
My name is Dr. Anthony Levatino. I'm a practicing obstetrician gynecologist, and I performed over 1,200 abortions. First, I'm going to describe a first trimester medical abortion. This is a procedure in which the mother swallows pills in order to terminate her baby, and it is performed up to the 10th week of pregnancy. The procedure involves 2 steps. Step 1. At the abortion clinic or doctor's office, the woman takes pills which contain mifepristone, also called RU46. RU46 blocks the action of a hormone called progesterone. Progesterone is naturally produced in the mother's body to stabilize the lining of the uterus. When RU46 blocks progesterone, the lining of the mother's uterus breaks down, cutting off blood and nourishment to the baby, who then dies inside the mother's womb. It is important to note that even after it has been taken, it is possible to reverse the effects of RU46 and save the baby if progesterone is administered. The sooner, the better. Step 2. 24 to 48 hours after taking RU46, the woman takes misoprostol, also called Cytotec, that is administered either orally or vaginally. RU46 and misoprostol together cause severe cramping, contractions, and often heavy bleeding to force the dead baby out of the woman's uterus. The process can be very intense and painful, and the bleeding and contractions can last from a few hours to several days. While she could lose her baby anytime and anywhere during this process, the woman will often sit on a toilet as she prepares to expel the child, which she will then flush. She may even see her dead baby within the pregnancy sac. At 9 weeks, for example, the baby will be almost an inch long, and if she looks carefully, she might be able to count the fingers and toes. After she has disposed of her baby, the woman may have bleeding and spotting for several weeks. Bleeding lasts, on average, 9 to 16 days. 8% of women bleed more than 30 days, and 1% require hospitalization because of heavy bleeding. The failure rate increases as the pregnancy progresses. If failure occurs, she will usually be offered a surgical abortion. For the mother, medical abortion often causes abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, and heavy bleeding. Maternal deaths have occurred, most frequently due to infection and undiagnosed ectopic pregnancy. First trimester surgical abortion called suction D&C, dilatation and curettage. This is the most frequently performed abortion and is used typically from 5 to 13 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist uses a speculum like this. This is placed inside the vagina and opened using this screw on the side, allowing the abortionist to see the cervix, the entrance to the uterus. The cervix acts as a gate that stays closed for the duration of pregnancy, protecting the baby until it is ready for birth. The abortionist uses a series of metal rods called dilators, like these, which increase in thickness, and inserts them into the cervix to dilate it, gaining access to the inside of the uterus where the baby resides. The baby has a heartbeat, fingers, toes, arms, and legs, but its bones are still weak and fragile. The abortionist takes a suction catheter like this one. This is a 14 French suction catheter. It's clear plastic, about 9 inches long, and it has a hole through the center. It is inserted through the cervix into the uterus. The suction machine is then turned on with a force 10 to 20 times more powerful than your household vacuum cleaner. The baby is rapidly torn apart by the force of the suction and squeezed through this tubing down into the suction machine, followed by the placenta. Though the uterus is mostly emptied at this point, one of the risks of a suction D&C is incomplete abortion. Essentially, pieces of the baby or placenta left behind. This can lead to infection or bleeding. In an attempt to prevent this, the abortionist uses a curette to scrape the lining of the uterus. A curette is basically a long-handled curved blade. Once the uterus is empty, the speculum is removed and the abortion is complete. The risks of suction D&C include perforation or laceration of the uterus or cervix, potentially damaging intestine, bladder, and nearby blood vessels, hemorrhage, infection, and in rare instances, even death. Future pregnancies are also at a greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. Second trimester surgical abortion called dilatation and evacuation, or D&E. A D&E is performed between 13 and 24 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist uses a weighted speculum, like this one, that opens the vagina widely. Because second trimester babies are so large, this greater access facilitates a late-term abortion. Late-term abortion requires that the cervix be prepared 24 to 48 hours in advance with laminaria. Laminaria is a type of sterilized seaweed that absorbs water over 8 to 12 hours and swells to several times its original diameter. Once removed, metal dilators can be used to further open the cervix as needed. Once the cervix has been stretched open, the suction tube is placed inside. A baby at 20 weeks gestation is as big as the length of my hand, from head to rump, not counting the legs. The suction machine is turned on, and pale yellow amniotic fluid surrounding the baby is suctioned out through the catheters. With babies this big, they don't fit through catheters this size. The baby's bones and skull are too strong to be torn apart by suction alone. This is a Sofer clamp. A Sofer clamp is made of stainless steel. It's about 13 inches long. The business end is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide, and there are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. The abortionist uses this clamp to grasp an arm or leg. Once he has a firm grip, the abortionist pulls hard in order to tear the limb from the baby's body. One by one, the rest of the limbs are removed, along with the intestines, the spine, and the heart and lungs. Usually the most difficult part of the procedure is extracting the baby's head, which is about the size of a large plum at 20 weeks. The head is grasped and crushed. The abortionist knows he has crushed the skull when a white substance comes out of the cervix. This was the baby's brains. The abortionist then removes skull pieces. He removes the placenta and any leftover parts of the baby with a curette, scraping the lining of the uterus for any remaining tissue. The abortionist then collects the baby parts and reassembles them to make sure that there are 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Once all the parts have been accounted for, the abortion is complete. For the woman, this procedure carries a significant risk of major complications, including perforation or laceration of the uterus or cervix, with possible damage to the bowel, bladder, and other maternal organs. Infection and hemorrhage can also occur, which can even lead to death. Future pregnancies are also at greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. Finally, I'm going to describe a third trimester induced abortion, which is performed at 25 weeks to term. At this point, the baby is almost fully developed and viable, meaning he or she could survive outside the womb if the mother were to go into labor prematurely. Because the baby is so large and developed, this procedure takes 3 or 4 days to complete. On day 1, the abortionist uses a large needle to inject a drug called digoxin. Digoxin is generally used to treat heart problems, but a high enough dosage of digoxin will cause fatal cardiac arrest. The abortionist inserts the needle with the digoxin through the woman's abdomen or through her vagina and into the baby, targeting either the head, torso, or heart. The baby will feel it. Babies at this stage feel pain. When the needle pierces the baby's body and the digoxin takes effect, the life of the baby will end. The abortionist then inserts multiple sticks of seaweed called laminaria into the woman's cervix. They will slowly open up the cervix for delivery of a stillborn baby. While the woman waits for the laminaria to dilate her cervix, she carries her dead baby inside of her for 2 to 3 days. On day 2, the abortionist replaces the laminaria and may perform a second ultrasound to ensure the baby is dead. If the child is still alive, he administers another lethal dose of digoxin. The woman then goes back to where she is staying while her cervix continues to dilate. If she goes into labor and is unable to make it to the clinic in time, she will give birth at home or in a hotel. In this case, she may be advised to deliver her baby into a bathroom toilet. The abortionist then comes to remove the baby and clean up. If she can make it to the clinic, she will do so during her severest contractions and deliver her dead son or daughter. If the baby does not come out whole, then the procedure becomes a D&E, a dilation and evacuation, and the abortionist uses clamps and forceps to dismember the baby, piece by piece. Once the placenta and all the body parts have been removed, the abortion is complete. Late-term abortions have a high risk of hemorrhage, lacerations, and uterine perforations, as well as a risk of maternal death. Future pregnancies are also at a greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Dr. Anthony Levatino, and in the early part of my career as an OBGYN, I performed over 1,200 abortions. One day, after completing one of those abortions, I looked at the remains of a preborn child whose life I had ended, and all I could see was someone's son or daughter. I came to realize that killing a baby at any stage of pregnancy for any reason is wrong. I want you to know today, no matter where you're at or what you've done, you can change. Make a decision today to protect the preborn. Thank you for your time. I will no longer do any more abortions. When you finally figure out that killing a baby...
By the way, that doctor that spoke, his wife couldn't have children, and so they adopted a child. And one day while he was having one of these abortions, the 3rd trimester, he got a call that his child was killed accidentally in the driveway where he lived. And the trauma of losing a child during the time that he was taking the life of the child had a tremendous effect on him. So if you have seen this before, I hope you have, but I'd like to get your comment on it, on how do you feel about abortion. These were the 3 abortion procedures. It took about 12 minutes or so I'll show it to you. But if you're able to see it, I'd like to get your comment. You know, we have the Republicans who are very NRA for guns, and we have the Democrats very much for abortion. If you listened to the debate a couple of nights ago, you saw that all of them were pro-abortion, while the Republicans are all pro-NRA. But, you know, a friend of mine is putting up, if you have a comment, call me at 860-321-7405. 860-321-7405. Now, what's been my experience? I remember the first time somebody had a miscarriage, and the doctor, Dr. Russo, I was back in 1959, and he showed me the size of a child, a fetus, a baby, whatever you want to call them. And he showed me how small it was. And it was because of a miscarriage. And over the years, over the 60 years, I've met a lot of women who've had abortions. And the consequences, but one thing I want to emphasize, of all the ones I've had experience, I don't think I've ever met somebody who had abortion voluntarily, that she wanted to have one. I remember one person had many abortions, and I said to her, "Oh, when are your boyfriend going to realize that you want to have a child?" But what I find is, like somebody may come into confession, and I'll say, "If you had to do it all over again, would you have an abortion?" And 99% of them said no. They're not in the same emotional circumstance now as they were when they got pregnant. They may have been in high school, they may have been in college. It may have been a third child that they're having. It could be all kinds of different situations. But I've never really had one say, well, I would have done it again. The ones I say is because of those circumstances. I remember one girl coming up to me and telling me, "Father, my boyfriend won't marry me if I don't have the abortion." So she had the abortion, but he never married her. Or the other time, somebody came in to see me with a young girl, and the couple came in who had already had an abortion, and they felt very badly about it. So they turned around and brought her to see me. So she was only 16, and I said, "Well, your mother will be upset, but she's your mother. I'm sure she'll support you." A few days later, I called the girl came to me because she didn't want an abortion. Then I called the family to see how she was doing. And the mother answered and said, "She's having an abortion Monday." So here's a girl who didn't want to have an abortion, but the pressure from her family. What will people say? She had an abortion. So I really, after 60 years, I don't judge anyone morally. There is a commandment, the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. Whether it's an abortion, or whether it's assisted suicide, or whether it's euthanasia, or whether it's on a battlefield where you have to defend yourself. But the fifth commandment is thou shalt not kill. And what it's saying, respect life from the womb to the tomb. And today we don't seem to respect that life. And we see what happens later on, what happens to many people. I'll tell you just a couple of stories. One person had an abortion many years ago, under 30 years ago. And she tells me she cannot sleep. It still bothers her because she went against her natural maternal nature. And she's punishing herself. And I told her, God forgives, but she can't forgive herself. And that's one of the big problems after abortion, helping a mother forgive herself once she realized what she's done and the emotional situation has died down. And I remember somebody, it was 49 years, and they came to me and said, "Father, it still drives me crazy." It's a tremendous cross you carry after you have an abortion. Now, if you saw it at all, give me your opinion. Call me at 860-321-7405. Or if you have another question, call me at 860-321-7405. And any topic that you'd like to discuss. Speaking of the Ten Commandments, I wonder if anybody, I'm sure there are, I wonder how many people really follow the Ten Commandments. You can't follow them if you don't know them. And I find that people really don't know the commandments. Most of the time they say they're suggestions only. But when God talked to Moses, he didn't say, "I suggest that you give these to the people." He says, "These are my 2 ways of loving. to love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And in the first three commandments, where we say, I am the Lord your God, you shall not have other gods besides me, that concerns God. You shall not take the Lord's name in vain, that concerns loving God. And remember to keep the holy day, the Sabbath, that pertains to God. So those first three commandments are very God-centered. But then the last 7 commandments is love your neighbor as yourself. The first 3 are concerned about loving God with your heart, your whole soul, and whole mind, and respecting his name and respecting his day of worship. But then the next 7 commandments have to do with loving your neighbor as yourself. Many times girls love their neighbor instead of themselves, and boys love their neighbor for themselves. So give me a comment at 860-321-7405, or if you have a question. Now we go to the other 7 commandments, and notice they have to do with your neighbor. Honor your father and mother. But that's just not honoring your father and mother, the 4th commandment. It also says, parents, honor your children. The responsibility of kids to obey their parents, and the parents' responsibility to support and bring up their child in the image and likeness of God. Today we see so many parents abandoning their children. I say Mass at different, like right now, I'll be going to Walker Wednesday. Last Wednesday, I went to McDougall Prison. Before that, I was at Northern Correctional. And before that, I was at the New Haven Community Prison. Now, all of those fellows, I remember I was in Niantic, and this one really upset me. I said to the girl, why are you here? She says, because I got involved with cracks. And I said, well, where'd you start getting crack? And she says, my parents, my mother used it, so she gave them to me. Now this is where we say, honor your father and mother. Also, father and mother, honor your children by giving them the example, a Christian example, Judeo-Christian example to them. So that's one of the 7, where we not only honor our mother and father, but they honor their children. And so often we find, when I see a child who's a bully in school, the first thing I say, what's happening in his family? Who is bullying them? I talked to a lady today for quite a while that as soon as her husband comes home, all he does is criticize her. And she doesn't want him to come home. So where is the husband honoring the wife? Where is the wife honoring their husband? And if you're not honoring each other and bullying each other, verbally, physically, or mentally, or sexually, don't be surprised if your kids turn out to be bullies too. So that's one commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the 5th commandment, is thou shalt not kill. Now, why is it that people are killing themselves? We have suicides all over the place. We have homicides all over the place. We've had 19 mass killings this year already. A mass killing is 3 or 4 people, 3 or more people that are killed. Seems every week we have a mass killing. And imagine if anybody really respected, thou shalt not kill. These 10 commandments are 10 ways of loving. They're not prohibitive, but ways of being free. Free to love God, free to love your neighbor. But how do we do it? In a very concrete way. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is doing what you ought. So if you have a question, call me at 860-321-7405. I'm Father Edna Donnelly of the Father Edna Donnelly Good News Fund. I live at the Pastoral Center in Bloomfield. It used to be called the St. Thomas Seminary. In fact, I went there when I was 50 years old, and now I'm only 86. So give me a call if you're listening. Now, the next one, the 6th commandment, which embodies a lot of things. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Again, loving your neighbor as yourself. I remember I got a call from somebody that said, I committed for my billboards. My billboards, I get a lot of calls from them. And they called about, Father, I committed adultery. And I said, well, where did you commit it? Well, in a place, exercise place. Well, some people go to exercise. Some people go to pick up girls or pick up guys. So she was married, but the guy that she was with was a single or divorced. So he had nothing to lose. While she had losing her family, her husband, her children. And she felt tremendously guilty because obviously she had a problem with her husband. If a man or woman commits adultery, it's a sign they're having a marriage problem. Just like if I have pain here, it shows I'm having a heart problem. So if you find adultery, it's symptomatic that there's a marriage problem. And the obvious was the guy was her husband was a heavy drinker, and all he did was sit and watch television. And she was lonely, not justifying it, but I can understand it. But now we see that under adultery, there's a lot of other sins. Masturbation, abuse of your sexual gift to love others, where you turn into yourself. But the one that I think if it is even greater than adultery, under the umbrella of adultery, is fornication, where people live together and are not married, and they use each other. Like one man says, my husband comes on, he wants sex right away, while a woman takes her a longer time. So she feels she's a legal prostitute. Now, kids give up their virginity in grammar school, give up their virginity in junior high school. I remember one of my billboards, somebody called me up in the middle of the night which says, Jesus, forgive me. And she was a 14-year-old girl. And I said, well, what are you calling for? She says, well, Jesus, forgive me. I said, of course he'll forgive you if you're sorry for what you've done. And I said, how old are you? She says, 14. I said, did you commit fornication? Did you have sex with a man or a boy? Yeah. Was that your first boy? Yeah. But you weren't his first girl. So you better have your whether you see you have a sexual problem, a sexual disease. Okay, I think we have a telephone call. Remember, call us at 860-321-7405. You're on the air with Father Ed.
Yes, Father. I have a question for you. Anointing of the sick, extreme unction, and the last rites, are they all the same?
Yeah, they have different names. But unfortunately, I'll give you a good example. Just 2 days ago, I got a call to go to the Britain Hospital. And I got a call from the daughter that said, Father, my mother is very sick, but don't go see her because you're going to scare her. Yeah. I said, well, when I was young, I was good looking. Now I'm just looking good, but I don't think I scare her. But she was thinking it as the last rites, like you just said. But the seventh sacrament is called the last sacrament. It's the last of 7 sacraments. You've got baptism, confession, communion, confirmation, marriage, holy orders, and the sacrament of the sick. So it's called the last sacrament. And it's up to extreme unction. You call it extreme. That's the last anointing. But what you should do is call the priest when he is sick, not when you're half dead. And I felt sorry for the daughter. I said, I'm giving her the sacrament of the sick. It doesn't say that she's dying. But she says if a priest comes into a hospital, then it's all over. So they have a misunderstanding of the last sacrament. It's the last of 7 sacraments. That's why they call it the last sacrament. Extreme unction is the last anointing. So unfortunately, people wait till the last minute. Last time I was in the hospital over at St. Francis, I got a call to go to the room because I was the chaplain there. But by the time I got there, the person had passed away. Even though the soul stays into the body 2 or 3 hours, because when you touch a body, it's still warm. The soul is still there. But unfortunately, people get scared when the priest comes in. But that's because we didn't give good education for the last sacrament, the last of 7 sacraments. So they all mean the same thing. But unfortunately, people think of the last sacrament as the dying sacrament. No, it's the sacrament of the sick. That's why we call it the last sacrament. We give it when somebody's sick. When I have Mass on a Sunday, many times I'll say, was anybody over 65? Anybody sick? And it's surprising how many people come up. And I'm giving you the last sacrament, the last of 7 sacraments. But none of you are dying, but all of you that are coming up are sick. So we're talking about the same thing, but we're emphasizing the wrong thing. We should emphasize the sacrament of the sick and not extreme unction or the last sacrament in the wrong way. Okay?
So, yeah, so a good idea would be like if we knew we had an operation, we're going to the hospital.
That'd be a natural thing. Father, could I receive it? Or people, before they have an operation, will say, Father, can I receive the sacrament of sick?
Right.
They may call you when they're at home, or they may call you in a hospital. Father, tomorrow is going to have an operation. Could you give me a sacrament of sick? Because they are sick. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting an operation. So the point is, if anybody's listening to that, don't wait until somebody's dying. When somebody is sick, I've anointed a lot of people. None of them were dying, but all of them were sick. We got psychological sickness. We got physical sickness. We got mental sickness. They've got spiritual sickness. There's all kinds of sicknesses. Like I was talking to a woman today, she doesn't want to go out of her house. When she got married, she only had her husband and herself and the minister there because she couldn't have anyone else around her. So that's a sickness. Even though she looks healthy and so forth, she can't go to church because of the crowd. She's got claustrophobia in a very bad sense. But I gave her a book on claustrophobia, a therapist who overcame her own claustrophobia. But that's a sickness, and she should be anointed. So I'm glad you brought it up because people get it all mixed up. And if there's just one person watching this program, I hope that's helped. But you probably didn't get a chance to see the first part of my program, the abortion procedures for the first trimester, second trimester, and the third trimester. How do you feel, even though you didn't see the actual showing of these abortions, but it was an animated way. It wasn't in a physical way. Like sometimes there was a movie called where you actually saw the ultrasound and Unplanned. I saw that movie. We actually saw the ultrasound of an abortion for the first trimester and the third semester, and that was really gory. But this is all animated. About what are your opinions? Are you pro-abortion or pro-life? What's your feeling?
That's a tough one. You know what I mean? Because I work with the dying. It's not cut and dry.
You don't ever judge the woman, like I gave example of people forced to have an abortion. But I've never really found somebody who freely says, I just want an abortion, period. Like somebody who has 2 children and says, I'm going on a vacation and I don't want to be bothered being pregnant. Take me out of circumstances. But
that's simple.
Yeah, in my humble opinion, there is a commandment, and we're talking about thou shalt not kill, and then I'm on the commandment of adultery. Okay, thanks a lot for your call. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye. Okay, if you've got an opinion on abortion, if you've got an opinion on fornication, if you've got an opinion on adultery, you've got an opinion on the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill, any opinions on the commandments, give me a call, 860-321-7405. 860-321-7405. Okay, now let's get on to the next commandment. Remember, the first 3 commandments concerning God. God comes first, his day comes first, and his name comes first, respect for his name. Then we covered honor your father and mother, and parents have to honor their children. And I have so many cases where children abuse. Now, you know that 1 out of 3 girls in family life are abused by a family member or a known member. I think 1 out of 5 or 6 boys are abused. I'll give you an example. One day I was saying Mass in a hospital, and a lady came up and told me that her husband abused her daughter, and he's now in jail. So when we talk about the 4th commandment, we just don't talk about children obeying their parents. We talk about parents obeying their children. And incest is quite prevalent when it comes to the 4th commandment. Okay, we'll put the hold on the 10 commandments. I'm trying to follow them. We'll put a hold on them. Again, if you'd like to call us, 860-321-7405. Father Ed.
Hi, Father Ed, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Ivy Chen.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a family member who is 89 years old, and she is Catholic. And the way that she connected with God is praying the rosary and even pray at Mass. So my question is, how do you break through her concept of God? And how do you introduce her that God is much more than the classic prayers of Our Father, Hail Mary, Glory be, but God is a God of power, of wisdom, mercy, compassion, and faithfulness. How do you introduce?
Well, maybe giving her an example of God's goodness, showing God's presence and his forgiveness, showing God's presence and his kindness. That God works all of his virtues. They're his virtues. He just lends those to us. But getting to understand that all the goodness that she has are all reasons to be thankful. So saying prayers is that sometimes people say prayers, but they did not pray because the prayers are just verbatim and automatic, just words. And those prayers are good, but in order to pray, you have to become conscious of God's presence within you. And when you become conscious of God's presence within you, then it's easier to become conscious of God's presence in others, and then letting God's kindness and generosity and forgiveness and gentleness come out of you. But I think she's got to discover God's presence. When we pray, we're always praying to God outside of us. I think somehow she's got to get to know that God is within us. God created us, and if there is life, if there is love, there is where God is. So I think having her become conscious, not only the God outside of her, but also the God within her, in my humble opinion. But also to be conscious of God's presence in the sacraments, especially in the Eucharist. And then you become, I had some candy before I came, I had some pizza before I came on the show. Well, that became part of me. But when I receive Eucharist, I become a part of what I receive. So I become more conscious of God's presence within her, especially through the sacraments. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Well, she's homebound, and she have to rely on people to bring the Holy Eucharist to her.
Well, the pastor should assign her if she's homebound. She should put it be on a list once a week or once a month or twice a month. And but I think encouraging her, not only let her continue to pray, because that's her comfort zone. Praying the rosary or saying the Our Father, whatever it may be, that's her comfort zone. And at 89, that's her comfort zone, and that's where she feels secure in. So to bring her out of that, beyond the comfort zone, at 89 would be difficult. But bringing her communion would really help her get out of that comfort zone. And the comfort zone is good. Saying prayers is good. Pardon me?
Yes, 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 I am. I was trying to think that it would be a good idea to establish a good personal relationship
Yeah.
to God,
Yeah.
and so that she can be, have an intimate relationship with the Maker.
Yeah, but at 89, I think her spiritual life is pretty well set. But it's never you're never too old to get closer to Jesus. You never get too old to get closer to Jesus. So, the more frequently she receives communion, then she actually, I become what I eat. I live not I, but Christ lives in me. But that would be a help. Receiving Jesus helps her become more intimate with Jesus.
I see. I become what I eat.
Yeah.
True.
Okay?
Okay, very good.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to call, this is Father Edna Donnelly from the Father Edna Donnelly Good News Fund. You probably see my name on the billboards all over the place. And call me. If you've seen a billboard, give me a comment on it. Comment on what I showed you on the abortion, or if you have a question, like one had a question on the last rites, this one had a question on going beyond saying prayers. Let's see. Father Ed, you're on the air with Father Ed.
Hi, Father Ed. This is Donna. How are you?
Good, Donna. Thank you for allowing me to come to your father's funeral.
It was our honor to have you there. I thank you so much. I thank you so much for celebrating.
Okay, it was my pleasure. Now, I have a question for you. You work in the pharmacy.
Yes.
So, what are the frequent questions or pills that people ask for? What are some of the? You're a pharmacist, but you're also a counselor. A psychological counselor. You're a combination of a lot of things. A pharmacist just doesn't put pills in a bottle. She also has contact with people. But what are some of the challenges that you have as a pharmacist?
Some of the challenges, I think, are just making sure that if somebody is getting a medication or they're doing something for their health, whether it be internally or externally, that they're actually getting the best that's there for them. And sometimes when you're answering a question, you have to, time is of the essence, and there's not that much time to talk to people, but you have to get to know them very quickly. And you have to get to know what's best for them, for their lifestyle, for what they're really looking for, and to make sure that when they're coming to you, like let's say somebody comes to us for cholesterol or something like that, or they're getting a prescription for cholesterol filled for the very first time, what do they have to expect? And even without knowing the blood work, like the doctor will have the blood work in front of them, you have to be able to counsel them on the best ways that they can take that medication, any nutrient depletions that they might have, and maybe some other lifestyle changes that they can do in order to help the medication work better, and also so that sometimes they don't have to be on it for the rest of their life.
Okay. Well, what about the opioid epidemic that we've had? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Is it getting under control? Or it seems that so many people are dependent on drugs, and I find that
there is a lot of dependency, and there are a lot more restrictions, and there's a lot more paperwork that people have to go through, and that the doctors have to go through also, and there's a lot more regulations. So I think the government and everybody like that is trying to crack down on this kind of stuff. But there's still times when doctors will prescribe for short term, even though it's short term, but somebody they really think is going to have some pain, and they really try to blast it out, with an opioid, maybe, shooting it with a cannon instead of shooting it with, a BB gun. But they really give it a wallop of a pain medication so that they have no chance of getting a phone call from that patient saying that I'm uncomfortable or anything like that, when sometimes it just takes some gentleness and maybe some homeopathic things to do in addition to maybe a non-opioid medication.
What about this rise of medical marijuana? Is that Is that a medication for pain, or is that a
You know, they're using it for a lot of things. They're using it for a lot of things. They're using it for pain. They're using it for anxiety. They're using it to just take the edge off of things so that people will feel better and their moods will be better. If they have less anxiety, they figure that people's moods would be better. But it's still in the experimental stages, and there's some drug interactions that do occur with it. So if anybody is taking that or deciding to take it on their own, because there's a lot of places now that you can get it, make sure you check with your doctor or your pharmacist to find out if there's any drug interactions. So you just need to be careful.
Well, I saw somebody sending me a billboard, 60 miles to Massachusetts.
Yes, yes.
And promoting, go over there and get high, but make sure you don't bring it back because you end up maybe getting arrested. But how many policemen are going to stop you coming back out of Massachusetts?
That's true.
But your advice, should medication be the first choice or a second choice? And you talked about different types of healing that takes place.
I think the first type of healing should be a natural way. And then I think if something can be taken externally, that should be your next step. It depends on if a person's on a lot of medications. If a person's on a lot of medications, then I think they should get advice from a professional, whatever professional they have available to them. But I don't think that you should go for the blockbuster, I'm going to take this because everybody says this is good for me. I don't agree with that because everybody's an individual, and I think if you're on medications already, you have to be careful. You need prudence.
And what's your feeling about not medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana?
I don't believe in recreational marijuana. I think there's a lot of other ways to be happy. If most of the people that I've heard of wanting to touch recreational marijuana are doing it because they want more happiness in their life. And I think there's a lot of other ways you can get more happiness in your life without having to alter your mind.
Do you see any negative effects on marijuana?
Yes, I see several. I see drug interactions. I see escape from reality. I see people not wanting to be in touch with maybe what their problems might be. Instead of addressing them, they try to mask them. So I think you have to get to the root of a problem if you have a problem and find out the best way to treat that problem for yourself as an individual.
Oh, good. Okay, do you have a question for me? Because I have an answer for everything.
I do. How do I know that we are doing God's will in our life?
How do I know if I'm doing God's will in our life? I think if there's prayer, oftentimes we don't realize that our will could be God's will. And if we, through prayer, and after prayer, you say, well, I should take this road in my life, and you're at peace with that decision, to me, that is God's will. It's got to be, it has to be prefaced with prayer. And sometimes people don't believe that their will and God's will can be identified, especially if it's the result of serious discernment and serious prayer. And with the power of the Holy Spirit, there comes a peace. I'm not saying you're going to be successful, but the only time you fail is when you don't try. But if you tried after prayer and prayed to the Holy Spirit, and you're at peace with that decision, even though it may not have come out the way you want it to come out, yet I see that as God's will. If you're sincere and after prayer make a decision, that sincerity is a sign of God's will. That's my humble opinion. And I'm proud of my humility too, by the way.
Me too.
Good.
Me too.
Okay.
I thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Father.
It's a lot of pleasure to get. Every time I talk to you, I get a different insight from the pharmaceutical world. Thank you for educating me, and and I hope educating our audience too. God bless you both, and we'll see you soon.
God bless you, Father. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, we only have 5 minutes left, and if you have a question, or if you have a comment on the Ten Commandments, let me know. I'm still on the sixth commandment, which is thou shalt not commit adultery. But like I said before, by the way, if anybody has a call me at 860-321-7405. And we only have about 4 minutes left to the show. Thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, there's a lot of adultery is the umbrella for sins against sex. You've got pornography, which is an epidemic. You've got adultery, somebody's married. You've got fornication, where people use sex for selfish gratification. I call it self-centered masturbation. And then the abuse of sex through masturbation. So under the umbrella of the Sixth Commandment, you have those differences. Now, sex is a gift from God. Sex is beautiful. God gave it to us as a vehicle of expressing love, as a vehicle of procreating children. So it's a tremendous gift that we have. And it's the abuse of sex that's wrong. But sex is not wrong, because sex and love go together. But if you take out love from sex, then it becomes very selfish. And then we have the adultery, we have the fornication, we have the masturbation, we have the pornography, and a lot of other types of sin. Like one lady called up to me and said, Father, I'm leaving my husband. The type of sex he wants is really diabolical. I can't stay with him. So here's the abuse of the gift of sex. So when God says, thou shalt not commit adultery, he's keeping us free. But once we throw out the Sixth Commandment and say, freedom is doing whatever I want, that's where destruction comes. And then let's go to the Seventh Commandment. You shall not steal. I don't mean the pencils in the store or the candy in the store. How often do we steal time from our employers? How much do we steal time for ourselves instead of sharing it with your family? There's a lot of ways of stealing on our taxes. Oftentimes I find people, shoplifting is a common sin. Well, nobody's going to catch me. So if nobody catches me, does that make it right? And then we have, you should not bear false witness against your neighbor. Yes, gossip destroys people's reputation. Everybody has a right to their good reputation. And this is a tough command. This one, gossiping and destroying people's reputation. I always say, well, when you say something about this person, would you say it if God was present there? If Jesus was present in your conversation with somebody, would you be talking about that? And so you shall not bear false witness against you. And then you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Okay? It's one thing to commit physical adultery. It's another way to commit it with your mind. And when you covet another neighbor's wife, it's not yours. It's someone else's wife. And then the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Thou shalt not take that which covet your neighbor's goods. That's the 10th. Your neighbor's wife. So, you know, if anybody really followed the 10 commandments, what would happen to this world? Would we be worried about North Korea attacking us? Would we be worried about Russia or China attacking us? Would we be worried about these mass killings that occur every week now in the United States? Would we be worried about our government? Our government is wonderful, but it's the Democrats, Republicans that are the problem. Where we have one extreme, the other extreme, and both of them are conservative in their own positions. And liberals are just as conservative in their position as conservatives are with theirs. Where you have greed, that's such a tremendous shell among so much of our world. So if we did not steal, you know, if we respected life, if we respected our children, but So let's end up with a Hail Mary. Jesus, I love you more today than yesterday, less today than tomorrow. Thank you for coming. Call me on my home phone, 860-335-2342. 860-325-2342. God bless you, and may God be with you. Take care, and good night. Thank you for listening.